Ready?
Rest in peace, headphone user. I'm so sorry. Hi, it is 007 December.
Yeet.
I feel so hype whenever that plays at the beginning of every single Bond film.
I feel like this is kind of heretical to say among Bond fans, but I really don't like GoldenEye on the N64 that much.
I can't agree or disagree because
it's just like one of these games
I thought GoldenEye was a T game on the, like a golf game.
I can't tell if you're being serious or sarcastic right now.
I'm dead serious. I'm having my mind blown right now.
But like 007 GoldenEye based off the 1996 Pierce Brosnan film.
I guess I just didn't put it together until this moment.
Yeah.
I was being a crackhead. That's all I'm
it's like
saying.
this big game everyone talks about, and they're like, "Oh, GoldenEye," and I'm like, Perfect Dark was better. There are better James Bond games, I heard From Russia with
Love is the best one, right?
Yeah, it's pretty solid. From Russia with Love or Nightfire, depending on your preference. But GoldenEye does have this like metal guitar MIDI cover of the James Bond theme, and that's where I was getting at.
Oh, is it good? Or is it bad?
I mean, that part's pretty good.
Okay,
that gets me hype.
I'm like, woo, 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 woo. I just want to go out and like do 500 push-ups. Is that what people do when they're hyped?
Dive rolling around.
I just want to yeet something.
That I do have a story relevant to this movie because you know how they always have that intro with like the gun barrel and the. Mm-hmm. So when I used to work at the Buena Vista University Library. Mm-hmm. To do inventory, they gave us one of those little like portable scanner gun things, you know, and they'd be like, "Hey, go walk to the back of the library and scan these shelves," and I'd be like, "Okay," and then like it's the library at the middle of the day, so no one's around, so I just start and then I turn down a like blind book hallway and just like,
and then like. There's a police officer there and you get tackled. No, I'm just kidding.
Sometimes it'd be a random library goer who would just like shake their head at me. But,
and you were like, maybe try living a little. You're like, check your privilege.
So now that I've derailed this podcast irrevocably.
Don't worry, I'm just going to put a Black Widow spider in your net.
Okay.
Question mark. I really like Honey Rider. She's the first Bond woman.
Okay.
Ursula Andress. I'm trying to bring the conversation back around.
I forgot her last name.
Oh, so Bond film number 1 is Dr. No. Yeah. Dr. No is very interesting because it's very formulaic and it's very reminiscent of the Hitchcock film because you even get like this pseudo-Nazi like character in Dr. No himself.
Yeah, although I think Dr. No is interesting to break down because I think it. Like, to me, Dr. No the film is kind of rough, and you can kind of tell, like...
Oh, yeah, definitely very rough around.
It's an interesting thing where, like, a lot of times film scholars will, like... There will be a movie that's very rough and categorically maybe wasn't that good of a movie, but, like, one or two things it does right, and those really catch on. And so film scholars attempt to, like, retroactively go back and paint that movie as this thing that was always this brilliant artistic statement.
Can't believe you're dragging me like this.
And I think that happens with Bond sometimes because the Bond movies grew to this really big franchise, but they started out as kind of these one-off, not like indie films, but they weren't like...
Sorry guys, I was taking out my contacts and I kept seeing out of the corner of my eye trying to stay on topic, but also like, what the fuck is she doing?
I mean, I assumed it was a contact thing, but also just your expression was like...
I'm so sorry. It wasn't Evelyn's fault, but she had a lot of pauses. She had a great thoughts that she wasn't collecting. She was wondering what the fuck I was doing over here.
See, all those pauses are gonna make it easy for me to like edit this back on track whenever we.
Sorry, we'll like continue.
The Bond films, we think of them as this huge franchise now, and they caught on, I'd say, fairly quickly, but at the same time, the first few weren't these huge budget things. They were these kind of like weird, like sort of weird one-off things that they didn't really expect to get much out of, more than maybe a movie or two. And like Dr. No, especially, like if you compare it to like the really huge nature of later, like in Spectre, where it starts with him like blowing up half of Mexico on accident. Like Dr. No is very subtle and very like a lot more about like kind of quieter, tense moments and kind of smaller scale stuff.
It's also a lot more gritty in terms of the narrative compared to like more newer Bond stuff, because it's interesting because coming from like pulling the formula from Hitchcock, where like the finer details about whatever espionage thing that's going on don't matter, because it's the relationships that matter, and it's like the coding that matters, and it's what is trying to be said with the characters that matter. With Bond, all the details matter. And so it's a very detail-oriented filmic experience, because it's very like this spy investigating and stuff happens.
And
like,
a lot of that, like the roots of that are interesting, because a lot of people have talked about
a lot of
like
people.
I don't know where I was. See, I was thinking about the Cold War. A lot of people.
A lot of people. I'm sorry, everyone. I keep derailing this.
This is going to be a great series.
It's going to be such a good. We're one film in, and we're already like, what?
We're doing
Sorry,
all
the
people. Podcast process more often. This is great.
Not getting drunk. Just you know.
So, what was I even talking about? Okay.
I keep thinking of that Timothy Leary, Cary Grant stupid thing during all these Bond episodes. I'm gonna go give LSD to the entire United States. Anyway, continue.
Okay. So a lot of people talk about Ian Fleming having written the James Bond series, and he had this experience working for like OSS and stuff, like having been basically a spy himself, and like a lot of what he wrote about Bond was, I think people have said that it was kind of this idealized version of like what spies wished they could be doing when they were just kind of like sitting around. But like I think that's where the focus on all this like minutia comes from, of like, you know, like when you're a spy you want to do this and you watch out for this and you use these tools, and like almost like a like kind of a nerd's perspective on espionage.
100% too, because then you even think of like, because it's interesting watching them too, like being like trained as a Hitchcock scholar, because I do find myself struggling with Bond movies because I don't think the details matter, and then they matter at the end, and you're like, wait a minute, what happened before? So that's a very fascinating thing about it. And then also like I really like how it's like Dr. No, while it's a little clunky, it does set up something that's used. So when we talk the Bond formula, it's like spy thing happens. Bond meets up with M and is given vague mission. Bond goes to investigate, meets Bond woman. The mission intensifies, and Bond gets thrown in a way he didn't think he was going to be for this kind of mission. Bond investigates more. Thing happens, and then like the climax of the film is reached. Final showdown, Bond ends, and that's kind of the like hero's journey that is the Bond movies, essentially.
Yes, more or less.
You know, it's very like, it feels a little bit like a serial TV show, like with like a Monster of the Week kind of segment.
Yeah,
that's
definitely.
kind of what it feels like. So what's thoughts?
Yeah.
I also really like in this movie specifically, I really like the spider like analogy that carries throughout.
Yeah.
Because you have Honey Rider when she's first introduced. So Honey Rider is the first Bond woman.
Yeah. She's introduced really late into this film, all
right?
things considered.
I was really surprised. I remember when we were watching it, we were like, is there like, what's going on? Like,
she just kind of appears. They're like, hey, what's this random lady doing scuba diving out here?
She's like, hi, I'm collecting seashells. And he's like, what? And then she's like, Sally sells seashells by the seashore. And then
she's
he's
like,
huh?
I taught myself how to read by reading a dictionary.
By reading a dictionary, yeah. And then she like has that knife, and then she's in a white bikini, which the entire time, I mean, she looked good as hell in the white bikini, but I remember, Evelyn remembers this vividly probably, I was just complaining about the white bikini the whole time. I was like, why do people think it's great? Why do people think it's attractive? It's gonna get dirty immediately. I'm so stressed out right now. What is going on? That's a really annoying detail to get focused on, but...
It just turned into my mom being like, why is she wearing that? It looks like she's wearing her underwear.
Oh my god, that is not what I said. But yeah, and I think her she's really interesting too, because like we have this perception that Bond women are dumb, I guess, bimbos for lack of a better term. But you watch Honey Rider at the onset of like defining what the Bond woman is, and she's like, I got raped. I killed my rapist by putting a black widow spider in his net, and I watched him die. Yeah. And then I taught myself all this stuff, and now I carry a big-ass knife in case someone tries to rape me again. And that is insane. That's, like, such an interesting angle for a female character, especially at this time.
Yeah.
Because there's such a depth and nuance and, like strength to her character that I think many people gloss over because they're like, Ursula Andress is so hot in this movie.
Also, I think... That's the thing about Bond women is that a lot of people, there's like, I guess they take it to be misogynist that Bond is a man and all these women like fall for him. Mm-hmm. Like that it's kind of like framing like that it's taking the agency away from him. But I think in a way it gives them more agency because like. You never see Bond like going after someone that isn't like consenting and aware of what's going on.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I don't quite have the words all in my head
right now. Well, you think
now.
like we're not there, yeah. But when you think of like Goldfinger with the woman at the very beginning who gets all like golded out, Shirley Eason, I think there's Shirley something.
There's like butt swats, but even those are like. Sort of consensual.
She's paid to be around Goldfinger, and she's not sexually gratified by him very clearly. And then Bond comes, and then she chooses to pursue Bond in sexual gratification, but people just see it as, she fell for him? Like, what?
Yeah.
When there's so much more depth and nuance to it. And it's also really interesting, too, like, Bond, because, so in North by Northwest, like we talked about last episode, you get Cary Grant's character being, like, the one that's pulled from Bond and kind of turned into Bond. Which is interesting because to go into that a little bit more, and you see it a lot in this movie in particular as, like, the very start of the franchise. So the point of Cary Grant's character in North by Northwest is that he's this man who's unsure of who he is, and he's like thrust into this situation, right? And Bond, it feels like Bond doesn't know who he is in the same kind of way as those Hitchcockian like gray men, like the gray suited men, you know? And I think you get a really strong sense of that in this first one because we don't get any background into who James Bond is. He's just kind of this entity that is, you know?
Yeah, he's and like even like they deconstruct that in some of the later films where he's like by the nature of what he does, he has to stay gray. So like even if he learns who he is, he's not allowed to connect with that. And that's,
I think in the book he was offered like a knighthood or something, and he had turned it down because he was like, I'm James Bond, I gotta be a spy. And then in these you get the sense that like he gets to the point where like, you know, he wants to settle down and have 2.5 kids, and he falls in love and blah, and we get that trope repeated. And then later on, in even the Sean Connery movies, we get the sense of like he hates his life and he's very unhappy, you know, he's like, please kill me, shoot me now, and stuff like that. And I think Dr. No is a solid setup for that. It's a good first step in terms of the Bond character. I also really like let's go ahead, like, so Dr. No is very fascinating.
Yeah.
As like he's Chinese and German, right?
Are or I want to say he's like Chinese and British or something. Like,
really? I thought he was German because he plays off the like Erich von Stroheim trope.
I can't. It's been a while.
So Dr. No plays off the
weeks.
Erich von Stroheim trope. I'm gonna say it now. No, I'm just kidding. I think it's really interesting though to pull from like a villain like that because you have Erich von Stroheim playing this very like unforgivable Nazi character. 99.9% of the stuff he did, not including Grand Illusion because that's a little bit but you get the very like the way with his black glove and his very like hello Mr. Bond blah 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 because it's this kind of trope and stereotype of this like pseudo-Nazi post-Nazi scientist who is trying to do dastardly things to the world. It's a very interesting spy trope that I think in a lot of ways started with Dr. No as far as I'm thinking because Hitchcock never went the approach of like trying to portray German people in his movies because he was trying to stay away from like equating people to their politics, I guess. But when you look at something like Dr. No taking the step to like code him in that way, it creates a very interesting experience.
Yeah, but it's also the like kind of motivations of Dr. No are really interesting and something that I think makes Bond a lot more interesting. It's one of those things that we were talking about that doesn't appear on surface glance because Bond talks to Dr. No and he's like, oh, I read your file and you were this and this and like Dr. No basically has this story of because he has this like weird mixed heritage, the like I want to say like the Western like nations wouldn't like kind of were weird to him because he had this like Chinese heritage and then the communists didn't like him because he had this Western heritage and so then like Spectre comes along and they're this amoral group who's just in it for profit and they're like yeah shoot come along dude and like it's this really interesting social commentary that I kind of didn't expect to get where like you have
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to giggle, but like I was just thinking about my grad essay where I was for film school and I was like, I just never fit in with the brown people because they said it was too white, and they never fit in with the white people because I was too brown. And then like you were saying that, and in my head I was like, man, I feel that.
but that's kind of what's really interesting about that is that they like in this first Bond movie like they immediately start like going for these kind of like they play this very formulaic spy movie and then they throw in something like that where it's this guy he's evil and he's making evil decisions but you understand that he got put in that position at some point for these grander, bigger reasons than that. That's
really interesting, yeah. And also, I think it also emulates the sense of, because, a big question we posed last episode with, like, the bigger, broader, like, questions we're asking for the full franchise. How is something so formulaic still so interesting?
Yeah.
And when you see something formulaic like this, I think Dr. No really sets up and showcases this very interesting thing, because, like, Bond is not the most interesting thing about the Bond franchise.
Yeah.
He's honestly like this Tabula Rasa-esque kind of character. Yeah. And it's like the other things like Dr. No, like, the Bond women that come in and kind of like craft Bond and how Bond interacts with the world and make for interesting film in addition to the formula.
Yeah. I wonder if that's kind of also, we were talking about how a lot of people like imprint on Bond kind of, and maybe it's because a lot of times he acts almost as our like insertion point, like it's almost like we're going in as Bond kind of.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's super cool. That's a really good way of looking at it. But yeah, okay, one thing I will say in the Bond movies that I particularly love about Dr. No and the Sean Connery Bonds is I am obsessed with the set dressing. Like, Dr. No's evil lair is the coolest, right? I'm like, man, I'd join Spectre too. I'm just kidding.
But and again, we'll expand on it as we go into the series. But like Spectre, I think is interesting because it's like, especially these first movies that were made during the Cold War.
That's a really good point.
The villains are not the communists. The villains are these actually fairly capitalist, like kind of what's the term, like not tied to any one nation.
Yeah, which is interesting because you don't get that with Dr. No, but you do get that a little bit more as some of the Bond films go on, because some of them definitely get to this weird place in terms of English colonialism.
Yeah.
That, like, even in this one you get that a little bit, because where is it set again?
It's in
Jamaica. Yeah, so it dives right into the colonialism right away. That's it. Yeah, and it gets kind of away from that, I think, as it gets out. That's what I was trying to say. It's the flip. So yeah, even setting it in some place like Jamaica and having, like, dealing with it in that kind of way is also very interesting, especially when you look at Britain, who's not traditionally, like, seen as a huge player in the Cold War, you know?
Yeah.
Seeing, like, them processing through, like, watching that happen, I suppose.
Yeah, and
not saying they weren't involved at all, but, you know.
Yeah, which I guess is maybe why in Dr. No they involve the Americans, because you have, like, the CIA guys working with him. Mm-hmm. Played by Jack Lord of... Was that Hawaii Five-0 fame?
Yeah, it was. You best to believe. But yeah, so I think, it's a kind of a clunky start to the franchise.
Yeah, like, especially, like, the climax does kind of start to... There's, like, a truck that's, like, breathing fire, and then Bond kind of, like, stumbles around this, like, radioactive facility for, like, 20 minutes.
That's the best way to describe Sean Connery's Bond. He's stumbling around. That's him in every single one of his Bond movies. He just kind of stumbles. Yeah. That's a good way of putting it.
He's getting started.
Hilarious. He's trying his hardest. But yeah, so I think it's a really solid start to the franchise.
Yeah.
Honestly. It's, like I said, clunky, but pretty solid.
Yeah. Three blind mice.
Oh my god, that is such a cute start to the movie. I really like that start to the movie. And then they just, like, kill the shit out of everyone. Yeah. I was like, what? Yeah. It was really, yeah. Opening, solid. So yeah, that was. Did you have any other thoughts about Dr. No?
Yeah, I don't like we were.
Did you have any other thoughts
Dr. No doesn't
Dr.
make
No?
as strong of an impression as a lot of the Bond movies,
Yeah.
but it's still worth talking about.
Still worth it. Still worth the discussion. And tomorrow we'll be coming at you with number 2, From Russia with Love.
The bad guy's actually, like, number 6, I think, not number 2.
Oh my god. Wait, what?
Everyone in Spectre has a number.
That's right. Sorry, I was like, what are you talking about? So yeah, we will see you guys tomorrow. You get us every single day this month, so get ready. Woo! Buckle up.
Take those caffeine pills and get
3 blind mice. I went super Tina Turner with that. It was a lot, guys.
That was great.
Okay, bye everyone.
Bye.